So today we are going to learn how to draft, cut and sew this perfect fitted palazzo trouser that you see me putting on. If this is what you think you'll be interested in, please do well to watch the video to the end. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel Sew with Zini. If this is your first time stopping by, thank you so much, and please do not forget to subscribe, like, comment and share, and make sure you watch the video to the end. On today's tutorial, we are going to be drafting a basic trouser pattern, and from there we are going to be deriving our palazzo trouser. Please make sure you watch to the end. So we'll be making use of our scissors, our marker, our measuring tape, our ruler and our pattern master. So these are the measurements I'll be working with. We'll start by ruling a line on top of our pattern. You can come down by 1 inch. This line is very necessary as it will help you in drafting the rest of the pattern. Now the next will be to mark the full length of the trouser, but before that you have to remove your band measurement or your band height. I'm using 1.5 inches for my band plus half-inch seam allowance, which will give me 2 inches. So I place my 2 inches above the horizontal line that I made in the beginning of the pattern and mark my trouser length. Please note that this is how we will be taking the rest of the measurements. We'll have to minus the 2 inches before marking out any measurement. So now I'm marking the length of my trouser, which is 45.5. Remember, I've removed the 2 inches. So this is the 45.5 inches. It stopped at the end of my pattern, so there's no need of marking it. I'll just use it like that. Now the next will be to determine the midpoint of the pattern. This is a very important measure to take while drafting a trouser pattern. The width of the fabric is 24.5 inches and the midpoint is 12.25. So I'm going to mark it out from the top of the pattern to the end, and then I'll make a straight line. So moving forward, we'll have to take out our horizontal measurements, starting with the crotch depth. Our crotch depth is 12 inches. Now remember that we have to minus the 2 inches band height before taking any measurements. So we'll mark out our 12 inches and then rule a line across. Now the next is to impute my hip measurement, which is 10 inches. So I'll mark it out, and when I'm done marking it out, I'll rule a line across. So I'm going ahead to mark out my knee measurement, and the measurement I'm using for the knee is 22 inches. So I'll rule a line as well. So now I'm done with the horizontal measurements, and the next will be to mark out the vertical lines. For our vertical measurements, I'm sorry I mistakenly drafted the area where the arrow is pointing off camera, but I'll still show you guys how I arrived at it. Now for these two lines where the arrow is pointing, this is how I arrived at it. For every trouser pattern, there's what is called the crotch extension. You get the crotch extension by dividing your hip by 10. Then whatever you get, you minus it by 2. So now here, our hip measurement is 43. When you divide it by 10, it gives you 4.3. And then when you minus it from 2, or you minus 2 from it, it gives you 2.3 inches. So now our crotch extension is 2.3. We are going to be adding the 2.3 to 1/4 of our hip, which is 10.75. So when we add 10.75 to 2.3, it will give us 13.5. Please, if you don't get this, I advise that you go back and replay it. I'll then find the midpoint of 13.5 inches and place it on the midpoint of our pattern, which gives us 6.5 on both ends. Then afterwards, we'll mark it upwards to the waistline. Now the next will be to mark out the 2.3 inches, which is our crotch extension. I marked it out and then I took it all the way up to the waist. Moving ahead, I'll have to mark out the waist, but first I have to determine the midpoint between those two lines where the arrow is pointing. Now whatever the midpoint of those two lines are, that is where I'll be placing my midpoint for 1/4 of my waist measurement. 1/4 of my waist measurement is 8.5, so the midpoint is going to be 4.25, which we will have on the both sides. So we have 4.25 here, and then we have 4.25 on this other end as well. Please, if you're finding this difficult to understand, do well to replay it as much as you can so that you get it and understand it properly. So with your pattern master, you make a slight curve from the waist down to the hip area. And the next will be to make a curve for our crotch extension and then mark it all the way to our waist. It is advisable to go up by 1 inch in a diagonal line and draw a curve with our pattern master to intercept the hip, after which I'll go up and connect the line to our waist. Also note that if you have a protruding stomach, instead of using this line, you rather go out by 1 inch and use it so that it accommodates your stomach. Also, it is very important to note that from your thigh upwards gets divided by 4, while from your thigh downwards gets divided by 2. So I've already labeled this. If you can zoom in properly, you see the waist, the hip, the thigh, and the knee. So the next will be to measure out the knee. So the knee measurement we are using for this is 19.5 inches. Dividing 19.5 inches by 2, it will give us 9.75, and then we'll place the midpoint of 9.75, which will give us 4.8 on the both ends. So we've marked it out. The next will then be to draw our curve. With our pattern master, we'll make a slight curve from our thigh to the knee measurement, just as you see me doing. From our crotch, we'll also make a slight curve from there down to our knee measurement. Then we'll place our measuring tape on the knee, and whatever measurement we get there, we'll take it down to the length of the trouser, and then we'll mark it out as well. So this is me making sure that I mark out the exact and correct measurements. After we are done with that, we'll use our ruler and make a straight line from the knee to the length of the trouser. We'll also do the same thing for the other side. So now this is our basic trouser pattern, and with this you can derive any shape of trouser that you want, but today our main focus is going to be on the straight trouser or palazzo pants, whichever one you wish to call it is fine. From our thigh to our knee, we'll have to derive a midpoint and mark, and from that particular midpoint that we marked, we'll place our tape horizontally and check the measurement on that area, which is 11, and mark on the both sides. Then with the measurement we got from that region, which is 11.25 inches, we'll take it down to the ankle and also mark it out. Now from that measurement that we marked in between the thigh and the knee, we'll rule a straight line down from there down to the length of the trouser. Now on the other side, we'll as well repeat the same procedure as the first. So now we are done drafting the front pattern of the trouser, and the next will be to cut it out and use the front pattern to draft the back pattern of the trouser. Now we'll go ahead to start cutting it, but before we do that, please remember that we'll be coming out by 1 inch from the waist side, because the owner of this measurement has a protruding stomach. But please, by all means, if your waistline is 20, if you're a size 8 or 10, you can forget about this. Okay, this is just for people with big stomach, so you can come out by 1 inch, and for the purpose of this video, that is what we are going to be doing. So over here, we've already placed the pattern that I'll be using to cut out the back, and the next thing that we are going to do is to use the sellotape to sellotape it to hold it together so it doesn't shift when we are trying to trace it out. So we'll go ahead and do that right round. On the next will be to trace out the pattern. So I started with my tracing wheel and I realized that it wasn't working, so I had to switch to my marker. I traced this all round before cutting it out. So I've gone ahead to pull out the front pattern gently so that it doesn't tear, and after that I'll readjust the lines properly. For the back, we'll have to go in by 1 inch, then use our front pattern to trace it out. After that, we'll roll a slanted line across. Now, the reason why we are doing this is to eliminate the space that usually pops up at the back of a trouser. From that particular point where we went in by 1 inch, we'll as well go upwards by 1 inch, and by so doing, we are raising the back waist up. The reason for this is because the back waist is shorter than the front, and if you don't do it, when you sit down, your panty lines might be showing and you wouldn't want that. So from there, we'll make a slant down to the waist. So now the next will be to determine our back crotch. So we'll be marking out 1.5 inches for our back crotch, and then we'll go under by ½ inches. So I'll make use of my curved ruler. As you can see, it's broken, but I'll manage it like that and draw a curve so that it will intercept with the line leading to the waist. Also, please note that because of our different body measurements, your curve and mine might not be exactly the same, but that's totally fine. The most important thing is to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Now, for every pant or trouser, the back is usually bigger than the front. This is to enable ease when you're wearing it. So I'm going to mark out the spaces. From the crotch, we are going to be marking out 1.5 inch. Then when we start coming down towards the knee area, we'll reduce it by 1 inch and then mark it all the way to the ankle part of the trouser. Now next is to use our curved ruler to guide us for the curve, and then we'll curve down a bit and then use our straight ruler and rule the down part. So I've gone ahead to shade out the areas that we won't be needing, as you see me doing. And the next is going to be how to draft the area for our zipper. Now, from the topmost part of the waist, we'll have to determine the hip line and mark. Remember that before we do any vertical measurements, that we'll have to minus 2 that we'll be using for the band. So we've already marked our hip line. So from that point, we'll come out by 1.5 inches. This 1.5 inches is for the zipper allowance, and then we'll box it. After boxing it, we'll take this 1.5 inches all the way to the waist. Now we are finally done with the back pattern, so we'll go ahead and label it. After that, we'll go ahead and cut it out. Now we are done with cutting out, so the next will be to cut out the band of the waist. So the waist that we are using is 34 inches, and we are going to be adding our zipper. After adding that, we are going to divide it by 2, and then our pattern, we've already folded it into 2, so whatever we get, we'll just mark it out and then rule a straight line and cut it out. So now the width of this band is going to be 4 inches. ½ inches will be used as the seam allowance, then while 1.5 inches is going to be the band. Now, please, while cutting it out on your main fabric, do not forget to impute your seam allowance. I did not do that on the pattern, but whenever you're cutting it out on your fabric, do not forget to put that, because it is very, very important. So after cutting this out, that will be it for the drafting of our trouser pattern. And the next is that we are going to be placing the pattern on the fabric and we'll be cutting it out, but that is going to be on the next video because this video is already getting too long. So please If you enjoyed watching this, please do not forget to subscribe, like, comment and share. And also please don't forget to put on your notification bells, get notified whenever I post subsequent videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate. Bye and see you in my next video.